Have you ever walked into a room and felt completely invisible? Not just overlooked, but actively erased by the very people who once called you a friend. For Lauren Croft, this wasn't just a feeling, it was a brutal reality. At the height of New York's social season, surrounded by crystal champagne and couture, she was a ghost. They had all chosen a side, and it wasn't hers. But what they didn't know was that the woman they were scorning was about to make an entrance that would not only shatter their perfect evening, but expose the billion-dollar lie their entire world was built upon. Stay with me, because this story of betrayal, revenge, and ultimate vindication is one you won't forget. The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel was a glittering galaxy of New York's elite. Chandeliers dripping with baccarat crystal cast a warm golden glow over a sea of Chanel gowns and Tom Ford tuxedos. The air hummed with the polite murmur of powerful people, the clinking of glasses, the soft laughter, the low-stakes gossip that served as currency in their world. This was the annual Starlight Children's Foundation Gala, the pinnacle of the fall philanthropic season, and for Lauren Croft, it was a self-inflicted form of torture. She stood near a towering floral arrangement of white orchids and hydrangeas, a flute of untouched champagne growing warm in her hand. Her dress, a simple but elegant navy blue silk sheath by Stella McCartney, felt like armor that was failing her. 2 years ago she would have been at the center of this galaxy, a shining star tethered to her husband, the charismatic tech mogul Trent Davenport. Now she was a ghost haunting the edges of a life that was no longer hers. She saw them across the room. Trent, looking effortlessly charming in a bespoke Brioni suit, was holding court. On his arm was Brittany, his new wife, a woman a decade younger with impossibly white teeth and the kind of vacant perfection that photographers adored. They were laughing with the Vanderbilts, and Lauren felt a familiar bitter pang in her chest. She had told herself coming here was a necessary step, a way to show him that she wasn't broken. That the divorce, the public humiliation, the narrative he had so carefully crafted of her being unstable and difficult, hadn't destroyed her. But the reality was a cold slap in the face. She tried to catch the eye of Genevieve Meyer, a woman who had once been her closest confidant, her maid of honor. Genevieve, draped in shimmering Versace, met her gaze for a fleeting second. Lauren offered a small, hopeful smile. In response, Genevieve's eyes flickered with something like pity before she turned her back with calculated precision, leaning in to whisper something to her husband that made him chuckle. The dismissal was as sharp and clean as a guillotine. One by one, the people she had hosted at her dinner parties, vacationed with in St. Bart's, and whose children's birthdays she remembered performed the same social execution. They would see her, a brief flash of recognition would cross their faces, and then they would find a sudden urgent need to inspect a painting on the wall, greet someone over her shoulder, or refresh their drink. The air grew thick, suffocating. Each averted gaze was a small stone added to the weight on her shoulders. The whispers were the worst. She couldn't hear the words, but she could feel them, the slight tilt of heads, the cupped hands, the quick, venomous glances in her direction. There she is. Poor thing. Can you believe the nerve of her showing up? Trent had done his job well. He had not only divorced her, he had excommunicated her. In this world, perception was reality, and he had painted her as the villain of their story. He was the brilliant visionary, the CEO of the billion-dollar data mining firm Davenport Analytics. She was just the bitter ex-wife who couldn't handle his success. A waiter drifted by. "Ma'am, another glass?" he asked, his neutral professionalism a stark contrast to the icy contempt surrounding her. She shook her head, her throat too tight to speak. She had to leave. This was a mistake. She wasn't showing them she was strong. She was giving them a front-row seat to her humiliation. Setting the untouched glass on the waiter's tray, she turned, her shoulders slumping in defeat. The grand exit she had envisioned, head held high, a picture of grace and resilience, was dissolving into a lonely, pathetic retreat. As she made her way towards the grand arched doorway, a wave of dizziness washed over her. It was in this very ballroom 5 years ago that Trent had announced the launch of his company. She had been standing by his side, beaming with pride, her hand in his. He had called her his muse, his inspiration. Now that memory felt like a desecration. She pushed past a velvet rope and stepped into the relative quiet of the hotel's palm court. The cold marble floor beneath her heels felt solid grounding. She took a deep breath, fighting the sting of tears. She wouldn't cry. Not here. She pulled her phone from her clutch, her fingers trembling as she scrolled through her contacts. She just needed to get out, get away from the stares and the whispers. Her thumb hovered over the icon for a car service when a new text message lit up her screen. It was from a number she knew by heart, a name that had become her unlikely lifeline over the past 6 months. "Are you ready?" the message read. A shiver, not of cold but of electrifying anticipation, ran down her spine. The plan they had discussed, the one that had seemed so terrifyingly bold, was now her only option. Defeat was no longer on the menu. She typed her reply, her fingers suddenly steady. Ready. Taking one last deep breath, she straightened her spine, smoothed down her dress, and turned not towards the exit, but back towards the ballroom. The ghost was about to get an escort. The life Lauren had with Trent Davenport had been built on a foundation of dazzling promises. They met at a Columbia University alumni event. She was a budding software engineer with a mind for complex algorithms and a passion for ethical tech. He was in the business school, armed with a silver tongue and unshakable confidence, and the kind of ambition that burned so brightly it blinded everyone around him. He was captivated by her brilliance. While his friends were chasing heiresses, Trent was chasing her mind. He would listen for hours as she sketched out her ideas on napkins in late-night diners, ideas about predictive analytics, about using data not just to sell products but to identify societal needs, to streamline humanitarian aid, to create a more efficient world. Her passion project, a complex system she called Chimera, was her masterpiece. It was a self-learning algorithm that could synthesize vast, disparate data sets to find patterns humans could never see. "You're a genius, Lori," he would say, his eyes gleaming with an intensity she mistook for love. "We're going to change the world with this." We. That word was the cornerstone of their relationship. They were a team. He was the frontman, the visionary who could sell her intricate code as a world-changing dream. She was the architect, the quiet engine working tirelessly behind the scenes. They married a year after graduation in a lavish ceremony at his parents' estate in the Hamptons. For the first few years, it was intoxicating. They launched Davenport Analytics with her Chimera algorithm as its core technology. Lauren worked 80-hour weeks refining the code, building the infrastructure, while Trent networked, schmoozed, and secured funding from venture capitalists who saw only his charisma, not the elegant lines of code that were the company's true asset. She never asked for a co-founder title. She was his wife. It was their company, their success. She trusted him completely. That was her great catastrophic mistake. The shift was gradual, insidious. As the company's valuation soared into the hundreds of millions, his compliments became rarer. We slowly became I. At board meetings, her technical contributions were glossed over. He would present her work as his own, using the broad, sweeping strokes of a master salesman to describe the intricate systems she had spent months building. When she tried to gently correct him, he would placate her later in private. "It's just business, baby," he'd whisper, kissing her forehead. "They need to see a strong, singular leader. It doesn't change the truth. We both know this is all you." She believed him, until the day she found the second set of incorporation documents. She had been looking for a tax file in their home office when she stumbled upon a locked drawer. Picking the cheap lock with a paper clip, a trick her father had taught her, she found a file she had never seen before. Inside were revised corporate filings, backdated and signed by Trent and a lawyer she didn't recognize. These documents systematically diluted her initial informal stake, legally redefining her role from a foundational partner to a mere supportive spouse. The intellectual property for the Chimera algorithm which she had naively never patented in her own name, was assigned solely and irrevocably to Davenport Analytics, of which Trent was the 95% shareholder. When she confronted him, the charming facade crumbled. The man she loved vanished, replaced by a cold, ruthless stranger. "It's for the best, Lauren," he said, not even bothering to look up from his iPad. "The investors need clarity. Your name on the core patents would have been a complication." "A complication," she repeated, the documents trembling in her hand. "Trent, this was my work, my idea, our idea." "You're emotional," he said, his voice laced with a chilling condescension. "This is business. You don't have the temperament for it. Your contribution was wonderful, but the company is what it is because of my leadership." The divorce was swift and brutal. His legal team, paid for with the money her genius had generated, buried her in paperwork. They used her passion, her late-night coding sessions, her single-minded focus on her work as evidence of her emotional distance and instability. He leaked stories to the press, painting a picture of a brilliant man held back by a demanding and ungrateful wife. Their friends, the ones whose businesses were now intertwined with Davenport Analytics, sided with him. It was easier. It was more profitable. The settlement was insulting enough to live comfortably, but a pittance compared to the billions the company was now worth. More importantly, she was stripped of her life's work. She was forced to sign an ironclad NDA, legally gagging her from ever claiming ownership of the Chimera project. For a year she drifted in a fog of grief and betrayal. She moved from their palatial Upper East Side penthouse to a small anonymous apartment in Greenwich Village. Then slowly, painfully, the anger began to burn away the fog. He had taken her past, but he wouldn't take her future. She started again, from scratch. In her small apartment with a second-hand laptop and a shoestring budget, she began to build something new, something better. She called it Helios Innovations. It wasn't about predictive analytics for corporate profit. It was about creating sustainable technology. Her first project was a revolutionary new system for energy grid management, a way to drastically reduce waste and optimize renewable energy sources. It was brilliant, complex, and entirely hers. She poured all her pain, all her intellect into Helios. It became her reason for getting up in the morning. She pitched it to a few small-time angel investors, but the shadow of Trent Davenport loomed large. No one wanted to bet on the unstable ex-wife of a tech titan. Until 6 months ago, when an email landed in her inbox. The sender's address was a simple encrypted string of characters. The message itself was only a few lines. "Ms. Croft, I have been following your work on the Helios project. It is revolutionary. I believe your past work was also revolutionary. I propose a meeting. KB." She had no idea then that those two initials would change everything. Kian Beaumont was less a man and more a myth in the worlds of finance and technology. He operated in the stratosphere far above the grasping, noisy world of people like Trent Davenport. While Trent craved the spotlight of magazine covers and conference keynotes, Beaumont craved anonymity. His firm, Beaumont Consolidated, was a global behemoth with controlling interests in everything from renewable energy to satellite technology and biomedical research. Yet he had never been photographed for a major publication. He gave no interviews. He was a ghost, but a ghost who could move markets with a single silent decision. Their first meeting was at a discreet members-only club in Midtown that was so understated it didn't even have a sign. Lauren, expecting a team of intimidating executives, was shown to a private library where one man sat in a leather armchair, a glass of water on the table beside him. Kian Beaumont was not what she expected. He was in his early 40s with sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through you. He wore a simple dark sweater and trousers, no tie, no flashy Patek Philippe watch. There was an aura of stillness about him, a complete lack of the nervous energy that powered most men in his position. "Ms. Croft." He said, his voice a low, calm baritone. He rose and shook her hand. His grip was firm. "Thank you for coming. Please." He gestured to the chair opposite him. There were no pleasantries, no small talk about the weather. He got straight to the point. "I've read your proposal for Helios Innovations." He began, his gaze unwavering. "Your approach to dynamic load balancing in decentralized power grids is a paradigm shift. No one else is even close." Lauren felt a flush of pride. "Thank you. I believe it's the future." "It is," he agreed. "But I'm not just interested in your future, Ms. Croft. I'm also interested in your past. I've read the original source code for the Chimera algorithm." Lauren froze. Her heart hammered against her ribs. "How? That's impossible. It's proprietary to Davenport Analytics." A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched the corner of his lips. "Very little is impossible when you have the right resources. I have a team that specializes in digital archaeology. We found fragments of the original code with your digital watermark still embedded in the deep architecture on a university server you used in your early development days. The code is a work of art. It's as much a signature as a fingerprint." He leaned forward slightly. "Trent Davenport didn't just build on your work. He stole it, and he's a terrible steward for it. He's using its predictive power for the most banal of purposes: targeted advertising, consumer debt analysis. It's like using a nuclear reactor to toast bread." For the first time in 2 years, Lauren felt truly seen. This man, this enigma, hadn't just glanced at her resume. He had excavated the truth of her life's work. The tears she had refused to shed at the gala now pricked at the back of her eyes. "He left me with nothing." She whispered the words, tasting like ash. "The NDA is a document designed to enforce a lie," Kian finished for her. "And I have very little patience for lies." Over the next few months, Kian Beaumont became more than an investor. He became a mentor, an ally, a confidant. He funded Helios Innovations with a blank check, giving Lauren the resources, the lab space, and the team of brilliant engineers she needed to bring her vision to life. But it was his belief in her that was the real investment. He would listen for hours as she explained her ideas, his questions always sharp, insightful, pushing her to think bigger. They discovered a shared language, a love for elegant systems and complex problems. She learned snippets of his life: that he was orphaned young, that he built his empire from nothing, driven by a relentless desire to create things of lasting value, not fleeting fame. There was a quiet sadness in him, a loneliness that mirrored her own. A bond formed between them, forged in late-night strategy sessions, and a mutual disdain for the performative world of new money. About a month before the gala, during a meeting in his minimalist sky-high office overlooking Central Park, he brought up the event. "The Starlight Gala is approaching," he said, looking out the window. "Davenport is the honorary chair this year." Lauren stiffened. "I'm not going." "I think you should," Kian said, turning to face her. "And I think you should go with me." She stared at him, bewildered. Why, to what end, so his friends can have something new to whisper about? "No," he said, his voice dropping to a more personal, intense register. "To the end of correcting the record. Trent Davenport thrives in the court of public opinion. He used it to destroy your reputation. It's time we used it to reveal his character. He's built his kingdom on a lie, Lauren, and kingdoms built on lies are fragile things." He explained the plan. It wasn't just about showing up with a powerful man on her arm. It was about a public, undeniable act of reclamation. It was terrifying, theatrical, and utterly brilliant. "I don't know if I can," she confessed, her voice barely a whisper. The trauma of her social exile was still a raw, open wound. Kian walked over to her, his presence calm and reassuring. "When you first walked into this office, you were hesitant. Now you lead a team of 30 engineers who would follow you anywhere. You have built something extraordinary from the ashes of a great betrayal. You are not the victim he painted you to be. You are a creator, a survivor. All you have to do is walk into that room and remember who you are. I'll take care of the rest." He held her gaze, and in his eyes she saw not pity but profound respect. "Let them stare," he said softly. "By the end of the night they'll have a reason to." And so, Lauren had gone to the gala alone as planned. She had endured the slings and arrows, the cold shoulders, the biting silence. She had walked through the fire of her humiliation to emerge on the other side. Now standing in the palm court, her phone in her hand, she felt the last of her fear burn away, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. She had played the part of the ghost. Now it was time for the resurrection. The 10 minutes Lauren spent waiting felt like a lifetime. She didn't return to her hiding spot near the flowers, but stood in the main thoroughfare of the hotel lobby, a deliberate act of claiming space. She ignored the curious glances from hotel guests and the occasional gala attendee drifting out for a phone call. She focused on her breathing, on the feeling of the cool marble beneath her shoes, on the plan Kian had laid out. This wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. A sleek black Rolls-Royce Phantom, impossibly silent, pulled up to the curb outside the hotel's main entrance. The doorman, a man accustomed to the arrivals of presidents and princes, straightened his posture almost involuntarily. The rear door opened and Kian Beaumont stepped out. He was transformed from the man in the simple sweater she knew from their meetings. He wore a custom-tailored tuxedo that fit him with the precision of a surgical instrument. On his wrist was a discreet but priceless A. Lang & Sona timepiece, its subtle elegance a quiet testament to his status. He wasn't flashy like Trent, who dripped with designer logos. Kian's power was inherent, radiating from him in an aura of unshakable confidence and control. He handed the valet a key, nodded to the doorman, and his eyes immediately found hers across the lobby. He walked towards her, his stride unhurried but purposeful. The few people milling about seemed to part for him instinctively. He stopped in front of her, his sharp eyes taking in her dress, her posture, the newfound steel in her spine. "Lauren?" he said, and the simple sound of her name in his voice was a balm. "You look magnificent." He offered her his arm. "Shall we?" She placed her hand on his forearm. The fabric of his tuxedo was impossibly fine, and beneath it she could feel the steady strength of his arm. As they turned back towards the ballroom, a new sense of power coursed through her. She wasn't Lauren Croft, the scorned ex-wife, anymore. She was Lauren Croft, founder of Helios Innovations, and she was arriving with Kian Beaumont. The walk through the arched doorway and back into the gala was like a scene from a movie played out in slow motion. At first no one noticed. The buzz of conversation continued. The orchestra played a soft Gershwin melody. They took 5, 6, 7 steps onto the polished dance floor before the first head turned. It was a junior analyst from a rival firm. His eyes widened slightly as he recognized Kian Beaumont, the mythical figure he'd only ever seen in grainy, unauthorized photos online. The analyst nudged his companion. The companion stared, his jaw slackening. It was a ripple effect. A woman stopped mid-laugh, her champagne flute frozen halfway to her lips. A hush fell over the table closest to them, then the next and the next. The murmur of the room didn't just quiet. It was sucked into a vacuum of collective shock. The orchestra faltered, a single violin screeching into the sudden profound silence before it too faded away. Every single eye in the grand ballroom was now fixed on the couple standing in the center of the room. They were looking at Kian Beaumont, the reclusive kingmaker, the man who never attended public events. And on his arm, looking not like a guest, but like his equal, was Lauren Croft. The gasps came next. Not just one, but a series of them, sharp, audible intakes of breath from all corners of the room. It was the sound of 100 social calculators short-circuiting at once. The narrative they had all accepted, the story of the pathetic ex-wife, was being deleted in real time. It was being replaced by a question mark so large it filled the entire cavernous space. Lauren kept her eyes forward, her chin held high, focusing on a point on the far wall just above the crowd. She could feel their stares like physical pressure, but now it wasn't humiliating. It was electrifying. She could see the confusion, the shock, the dawning frantic reassessment on their faces. Then she allowed herself to look at them. She met the astonished gaze of Genevieve Meyer, whose face had gone pale, her mouth slightly agape. She saw the Vanderbilts, their polite smiles frozen in place. And finally she looked at Trent. He was standing by the main stage mid-sentence, a microphone in his hand as he was about to make his welcoming remarks. His smile faltered, then vanished completely. His eyes darted from Lauren to the man beside her, and a flicker of disbelief followed by a wave of pure, unadulterated fury washed over his features. The color drained from his face. For one exquisite moment, the master manipulator, the man who controlled every room he entered, had lost control. He looked at her as if he were seeing her for the first time, not as the wife he had discarded, but as a formidable unknown adversary. Kian, seemingly oblivious to the seismic shockwave he had created, leaned down and spoke in her ear, his voice a low anchor in the swirling silence. "Phase 1 complete," he murmured. "Now let's get a drink. I believe you left yours behind." With a calm that bordered on surreal, he guided her through the sea of stunned faces towards the main bar, the silence breaking behind them into a frantic, explosive roar of whispers. The ghost had returned, and she had brought a titan with her. The game had just changed. The journey from the entrance to the bar was like walking through a wax museum that had suddenly come to life. People who had looked through Lauren just an hour ago were now practically tripping over themselves to be noticed by her. Their expressions were a comical mixture of shock, awe, and desperate recalculation. "Lauren, darling," a voice trilled. It was a woman named Cassandra who had pointedly ignored her earlier. "You look absolutely breathtaking. I had no idea you knew Kian Beaumont." Kian didn't even break his stride. He gave the woman a nod so brief it was almost an illusion, his focus entirely on Lauren. He was creating a protective bubble around her, a silent declaration that she was the only person in the room who had his attention. They reached the bar, and the bartender, who had previously been a model of indifference, was now a flurry of nervous energy. "Mr. Beaumont, Ms. Croft, what can I get for you?" "It is an honor, sir." "A glass of the 96 Dom Perignon for Ms. Croft," Kian said, his voice calm and authoritative. "And I'll have a sparkling water." As the bartender scrambled to fulfill the order, the first brave soul made his approach. It was Jonathan Meyer, Genevieve's husband, a hedge fund manager, who had always treated Lauren with a kind of patronizing sympathy after the divorce. "Kian," he said, extending a hand with a familiarity he clearly didn't feel. "Jonathan Meyer, we've never been formally introduced. A pleasure to finally meet you. I'm a great admirer of your work in the aerospace sector." Kian took his hand briefly. "Meyer," he acknowledged, his gaze cool. Jonathan then turned to Lauren, his smile overly bright. "Lauren, so wonderful to see you. You must catch me up on what you've been doing. Genevieve was just saying how much she misses you." The lie was so bald-faced it was almost impressive. Lauren met his gaze, and instead of the anger or hurt he might have expected, he saw only a serene, unreadable calm. "I've been busy building my company," she said, her voice clear and steady. The bartender handed her the champagne, and she took a delicate sip. "Helios Innovations." Before Jonathan could formulate a response, Genevieve herself materialized at his side, her Versace dress shimmering nervously. Her face was a mask of strained friendliness. "Laurie, there you are," she exclaimed, touching Lauren's arm as if they were still the best of friends. "I was looking all over for you earlier. This room is such a madhouse. You remember I told you about my charity luncheon for the Arts Council? You simply must come." The invitation, which Lauren knew would never have been extended an hour ago, hung in the air. This was the moment she had both dreaded and craved the confrontation with her former friend. She looked at Genevieve, truly looked at her, and felt not the sting of betrayal, but a profound sense of disappointment. "I'm afraid my schedule is quite full for the foreseeable future, Genevieve," she said, her tone polite but unmistakably final. She turned her back slightly, a mirror image of the dismissal Genevieve had given her earlier, and focused her attention on Kian. The circle was closed. Genevieve flushed, a tide of crimson creeping up her neck, and allowed her husband to steer her away into the crowd, their whispered argument already beginning. All around them, the social landscape was being redrawn in real time. Whispers turned to frantic searches on phones. Who is Lauren Croft? What is Helios Innovations? Beaumont is with Davenport's ex-wife. The carefully constructed reality of the past 2 years was crumbling. Across the room, Trent had recovered his composure, but a muscle twitched in his jaw. He was surrounded by his board members speaking in low, urgent tones, his eyes constantly darting towards the bar. He saw the shift. He saw his allies, his sycophants looking at him with new, uncertain eyes. His complete social and professional dominance, which he had taken for granted, was suddenly in question. He decided to act. He strode towards them, his new wife Brittany trailing in his wake like a decorative afterthought. He plastered on his signature charismatic smile, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Well, well," he said, his voice booming slightly, an attempt to reclaim control of the scene. "Lauren, I didn't expect to see you here." He then turned to Kian, extending a hand. "Trent Davenport, I don't believe we've had the pleasure. You've certainly made an entrance." Kian looked down at the outstretched hand but didn't take it. He took a slow sip of his water, letting the silence stretch to an uncomfortable degree. The small crowd that had gathered to watch held its breath. "We know who you are, Davenport," Kian said finally, his voice devoid of any warmth. Trent's smile tightened. He dropped his hand, a flicker of humiliation in his eyes. He turned his attention back to Lauren, his tone shifting to one of feigned concern. "Laurie, you look well. But this is a bold move even for you. I hope you know what you're doing. Some circles are unforgiving." It was a veiled threat, a reminder of her past exile, a warning. This was the moment, the confrontation she had rehearsed in her mind 1,000 times. She looked her ex-husband in the eye, the man who had stolen her work, her reputation, and her past. And she felt nothing but a cold, clear focus. "I know exactly what I'm doing, Trent," she said, her voice ringing with a confidence she hadn't possessed in years. "The question is, do you—" Before he could respond, the gala's host tapped the microphone on stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, if you could please take your seats. It's time for our keynote address and the main event of our evening, the Starlight Live auction." Trent was forced to retreat, the parting shot undelivered. He cast one last venomous look at Lauren before turning back to the stage. Kian placed a reassuring hand on the small of her back. "Are you ready for Phase 2? He asked quietly. "More than ready," she replied, her voice steady. They made their way to their table, Table 1 front and center, a table that was usually reserved for the guest of honor. Trent, from his seat on the dais, watched them, his face a thunderous mask. The auction was about to begin, and the most valuable item of the night wasn't a luxury vacation or a piece of art. It was a lie, and Kian Beaumont was about to bid on its destruction. The auction began with the usual fare, a week-long stay at a private villa in Tuscany, a custom piece of jewelry from Harry Winston, a walk-on role in an upcoming blockbuster. Kian sat impassively, his auction paddle lying untouched on the table. Lauren felt a nervous energy thrumming beneath her skin, but on the surface she was a portrait of composure, sipping her champagne and occasionally murmuring a quiet comment to Kian. Trent, seated on the stage, was visibly tense. He kept glancing at their table, trying to project an air of nonchalant command, but the strain was evident. The room's attention was divided between the auctioneer on stage and the silent drama unfolding at Table 1. Finally, the auctioneer, a jovial man with a booming voice, arrived at the main event. "And now for our final item of the evening," he announced. "A truly unique opportunity. Davenport Analytics, in its incredible generosity, is offering a one-on-one full-day mentorship with its visionary founder and CEO, Mr. Trent Davenport himself. This is a chance to learn from the best, to see inside one of the most innovative companies on the planet. The bidding will start at $100,000. A polite applause rippled through the room. Trent smiled, a preening, self-satisfied expression on his face. This was his moment to reassert his dominance, to remind everyone who the real power player in the room was. 100,000, do I hear 100,000? the auctioneer chanted. A hand went up. 100,000 from Mr. Peterson. Do I hear 150? Another hand. 150. Do I hear 200? The bidding climbed steadily, a vanity play among Trent's competitors and admirers. It reached $400,000 and the pace slowed. 400,000 going once, going twice. And then Kian Beaumont lifted his paddle. He didn't shout or gesture wildly. He simply raised it a few inches off the table. $1 million, Kian said, his voice calm but carrying effortlessly through the silent ballroom. A collective gasp even louder than the one at his entrance swept through the room. The auctioneer's eyes bulged. Trent's smile froze on his face. This wasn't a bid. It was a statement. A multi-billionaire bidding $1 million for a day with a lesser billionaire was unheard of. It was an act of dominance. "Oh, $1 million, the auctioneer stammered. Going once, going twice. No other paddles went up. No one was insane enough to bid against Kian Beaumont. Sold, the auctioneer cried, slamming his gavel down. For $1 million to the gentleman at table 1, Mr. Kian Beaumont. The room erupted in applause, a mixture of shock and excitement. Trent was forced to stand and smile, nodding towards Kian in a pantomime of gratitude, but his eyes were like chips of ice. As the applause died down, Kian stood up. He walked not back to his seat, but towards the stage. He moved with such authority that no one, not the event staff nor Trent himself, thought to stop him. He took the microphone from the stunned auctioneer. "Thank you," he said, his voice resonating through the ballroom's sound system. "That is a generous, if slightly unusual, round of applause for a purchase." A few nervous chuckles rippled through the audience. "I have the utmost respect for the Starlight Foundation and its mission," he continued, his gaze sweeping the room before landing squarely on Trent. "And I believe in the power of mentorship. I believe in honoring the true innovators, the architects of progress. And that is why I made this bid tonight." He paused, letting the tension build. "I'm not interested in learning how to run a company that markets consumer debt to college students. I'm not interested in a masterclass on how to sell user data to the highest bidder. I'm interested in the genius that started it all." Trent, still standing on the stage, took a half step forward, his face darkening with confusion and rage. "What is the meaning of this?" Kian ignored him, his focus entirely on the audience. "Tonight I didn't purchase a day with Trent Davenport. I purchased a platform. A $1 million platform to correct a record. You all know Davenport Analytics. You know its multi-billion-dollar valuation, but you don't know its true origin story. You've been told a lie." He gestured towards table 1. "The visionary behind the core technology of Davenport Analytics, the brilliant mind that created the Chimera algorithm from scratch, is not the man standing next to me." He locked eyes with Lauren. "It's the woman he tried to erase. Her name is Lauren Croft." A tidal wave of murmurs and shocked whispers crashed through the room. People twisted in their seats to stare at Lauren, who now stood by her chair, her expression resolute. Trent grabbed another microphone. "This is outrageous. He's lying. My ex-wife is a troubled woman, and this man is clearly taking advantage of her delusions." "Is he?" Kian's voice was as sharp as steel. "Then perhaps you can explain this." On the massive screens on either side of the stage, which had been displaying the logo of the gala, an image suddenly appeared. It was a complex screen of code, elegant and intricate. At the bottom, highlighted in a red box, was a digital watermark embedded in the source code itself, L. Croft, 0.9 Columbia Archives, 2012. "This is a fragment of the original Chimera source code," Kian announced, "retrieved from a university server where Ms. Croft did her initial development work. It predates the founding of Davenport Analytics by 2 years. Her digital fingerprint is on the foundation of your entire empire, Mr. Davenport." The screen changed, showing side-by-side comparisons of Lauren's original code and the current proprietary code of his company. The similarities were undeniable, the core structure identical. It was a visual, irrefutable accusation of theft on a grand scale. Trent stood frozen, his face ashen. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He was exposed, his carefully crafted persona stripped away in front of the very people he had spent his life trying to impress. Genevieve Meyer was staring at the screen, her hand over her mouth in horror. Jonathan looked at Trent not with admiration, but with the cold calculation of a man seeing a toxic asset. Kian's final words were delivered with a quiet, devastating finality. The greatest innovations are built on truth and integrity. Anything else is just a house of cards, and the wind, as you can see, has started to blow. He set the microphone down on the lectern with a soft thud that echoed like a gunshot in the silent room. He walked off the stage past the petrified form of Trent Davenport and straight back to Lauren. He offered her his arm once more. "I believe we're finished here," he said softly. Without a backward glance at the chaos they had wrought, they turned and walked out of the ballroom. This time, no one gasped. They stared in silent, stunned awe at the woman who had entered as a ghost and was leaving as a queen, having reclaimed not just her work, but her name, her truth, and her future. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic for Trent Davenport. Before Lauren and Kian had even reached the lobby of the plaza, cell phones were alight across the ballroom. Oscar Reed, a veteran society columnist for the New York Times, who had been in attendance, was already dictating the opening paragraph of the story that would grace the front page of the business section the next morning. Tech Titan. Toppled by ghost of the past, the headline would read. By midnight, the story was breaking online. By morning, it was a global phenomenon. The video of Kian's speech, surreptitiously filmed by a dozen guests, went viral. The term Croft ver 0.9 was trending on Twitter. Journalists and industry analysts began digging, and the carefully constructed narrative of Trent Davenport, the lone genius, unraveled with astonishing speed. Investors panicked. Davenport Analytics stock plummeted in pre-market trading. The board of directors, the same men who had toasted Trent's success just hours earlier, called an emergency meeting. Faced with irrefutable proof of intellectual property fraud and the public relations nightmare of the century, they had no choice. By noon the next day, Trent Davenport was forced to resign in disgrace from the company he had stolen. The empire built on Lauren's work had crumbled in less than 24 hours. Lauren watched the news unfold not with glee, but with a profound sense of catharsis. It was like a weight she hadn't realized she was carrying had finally been lifted from her soul. She wasn't at her small apartment. Kian had insisted she stay in a guest suite in his penthouse, a serene minimalist space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entirety of Central Park. She sat on a sofa, a mug of tea in her hands, as Kian walked in holding a tablet. "The board of Davenport Analytics has made an offer," he said, his voice neutral. Lauren braced herself. "What kind of offer?" "They are in free fall. They need to restore shareholder confidence. They need legitimacy. They are offering you a controlling interest in the company, a public apology, and Trent's entire vacated share package." He paused. "They want you to come back, to run the company that was always rightfully yours." 2 years ago, she would have wept with joy at such a prospect. It was everything she had ever wanted. Vindication controlled the return of her life's work. She looked out the window at the sprawling city below, then back at Kian. "No," she said, the word coming out with surprising ease. Kian raised an eyebrow, a flicker of a smile playing on his lips. "No. Davenport Analytics is tainted." She explained, a newfound clarity in her voice. "Its foundation is a lie. Its entire culture is built on Trent's greed. Chimera is a brilliant algorithm, but he pointed it in the wrong direction. I don't want to fix something so broken. I want to build something new." She stood up and walked towards him, her eyes shining with passion. "Helios Innovations. That's my future. We're on the verge of a breakthrough in sustainable energy. That's a legacy I want to build. Not one based on dredging up the past, but on creating a better future." Kian looked at her, and the respect in his eyes was deeper than she had ever seen. "I was hoping you'd say that," he said softly. "But there is the matter of the Chimera algorithm. It's your creation. It shouldn't be left in their hands." "I have an idea about that too," she said. She proposed a counteroffer. She would decline the shares and the CEO position. Instead, she would license the core Chimera algorithm back to the company for a staggering annual fee under a new foundation she would establish. This Croft Foundation would be dedicated to promoting ethical technology and funding STEM education for women. She would take the tool of her betrayal and transform it into a force for good. She would be its steward, not its prisoner. Kian's smile was genuine now. That's not just a business move, Lauren. That's poetry. In the weeks that followed, the world saw Lauren Croft not as a victim, but as the formidable leader she had always been. She appeared in one and only one major interview with Forbes magazine. The cover story wasn't about her divorce or the drama. It was about Helios innovations and the future of green technology. She was poised, brilliant, and forward-looking. She mentioned Trent's name only once, referring to the entire ordeal as an unfortunate chapter that had ultimately clarified her mission. Her phone, once silent, now rang incessantly with calls from people who had previously shunned her. Genevieve Meyer sent a long, rambling email full of apologies and excuses which Lauren deleted without reading. She didn't have time for the ghosts of her past. She was too busy building the future. Her relationship with Kian deepened, evolving from a strategic alliance into a true partnership. They were two people who understood each other on a fundamental level, who saw the world not just as it was, but as it could be. They were a quiet power couple. Their influence felt not in the gossip columns, but in the boardrooms and research labs where the future was being forged. One evening, months after the gala, she stood with Kian on the balcony of his penthouse, looking down at the glittering lights of the city. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. The spectacle, the public nature of it all. He turned to her, his expression serious. Trent Davenport built his world on the perception of others. The only way to dismantle it was to change that perception in a way that could never be undone. It wasn't a spectacle, Lauren. It was a detonation. And from the rubble you're building an empire of your own. An honest one. She looked at the lights, no longer just a backdrop to a life of pain, but a landscape of infinite possibility. The woman who had entered that gala as an invisible ghost was gone forever. In her place was a founder, a philanthropist, an innovator. She had not only reclaimed her story, she was finally truly writing the next chapter herself. And so Lauren's story isn't just about a dramatic entrance at a party. It's a powerful reminder that our worth is never determined by the opinions of those who refuse to see us. It's about the quiet strength it takes to rebuild from nothing, the courage to face down those who wronged us, and the wisdom to know that true victory isn't about revenge, but about building a future so bright it eclipses the shadows of the past. She walked into that room hoping for acceptance, but walked out with something far more valuable: self-reclamation. What did you think of Lauren's incredible journey? Have you ever felt underestimated or had to fight to have your voice heard? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and make sure you subscribe to our channel for more true life stories of resilience and incredible comebacks. Thank you for listening.